So we were talking about your OPSEC practices, and that's really what was intriguing me, because you have a pattern of life right now that requires you to live in a almost, I want to say, operational capacity that only a few people can live in. So my question to you, Janice, was twofold. I wanted to know, number one, which I knew the answer, you still adopt and incorporate those practices that you learned not only from John, but your own life and your own life experience. But I wanted to ask you for the audience perspective. Now that you've lived that life, and now that you've been, what it feels like to be on the lam, which is me personally, I know that very intimately. It's not paranoia when people want to kill you, right? So, I'm just being serious. So, because of that, today, as we speak right now, do you feel stress specifically regarding the amount of OPSEC that you apply to your life? And this is a really focused question, because I think the audience would love to know how much, if you do experience stress, how much has it increased or decreased over time? Does it dissipate? Does it get easier? Does your OPSEC practices get easier? Does your pattern of life stress get easier over time? And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so I will say, after first meeting John, it was extremely stressful, because just a little bit of my background. I was a prostitute when I met him, and I had a pimp, and he was beating me. And so when John came into the picture, my pimp was approached by representatives of the cartel to have me be their inside man. And so trying to deal with the stress of that, basically trying to give the illusion to my pimp and those people that I was cooperating with him, while simultaneously making sure that I'm making John aware, without telling him what's happening, but just making him aware of certain things that they were asking me to do, and not necessarily that, but trying to make him aware of how to protect himself against those things. Like, for instance, there was I would drive him around when we were living in Portland. And so I told him, don't park the car outside of the parking garage. Always park it inside the parking garage, because they wanted to do something to disable the car. And I would tell him, don't go out by yourself. Make sure you have somebody else drive you. So that was my way of kind of not necessarily outing myself, but at the same time making him aware of what was happening. And that was extremely stressful for me, because I never, I could never relax. And I never knew who around me was going to be the one to pass on whatever information I'm talking to John about, because there was a lot of moving pieces around me at all times, and it was extremely stressful. Since John has passed, it's become stressful in another way. Not as stressful as that, but just stressful because he was who I leaned on, and this was his area of expertise, and I could just, take what little bit of knowledge I had, and that was fine for me, and he covered the rest, but I don't have that covering now. And so it's a little scary. It's a little stressful, but at the same time, though, when things happen, it's like, okay, my instincts just kick in, and I'm in my element, and it's just like breathing for me, But just thinking about it, or being prepared, making sure I'm prepared for it, maybe that's a little bit stressful. You don't know what's going to happen, where it's going to come from, how it's going to look. But when it happens, I'm in my element, and I'm like, all right, it's go time, and I'm just, aware, on point,
But that speaks to, being in tune with these things prior to the problem happening. So, they're so ingrained in you that instinct kicked in. It's the same one that would get you to jump out of the way of a moving train. You might not even have time to think about the train, but you're going to know to get the hell out of the way of it. So you jump right into action. Just 2-3 weeks ago, you were uncomfortable. Out and about in Spain, and you had people behaving in such a way that was odd, and you confided that, you were public about it. That's the reason I'm talking about it. But you also confided some of the details to me, and it did indeed sound odd. And Janice right away jumped into operational mode, I guess is the best way to put it. But everything that she was thinking about doing, saying, was very coordinated, very precise, and that's what I was always accustomed to with John. John sensed danger. He jumped from, sitting on the couch, sipping a whiskey, cracking jokes, right into operational mode. And it was a completely different tone that was set. But he wasn't coming up with it right then, which is the worst time to come up with it. These were already things that he had thought about, and now was just the time to put them into motion.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things. I think this conversation is, I don't think I know, use my words. This conversation is reaffirming that I had a school idea that I was playing around with a year ago. I was like, I'm going to create a trap school where, people are going to go through hell for a week, like Hell Week, and experience hell so they can understand what stress feels like in an austere situation so that they can perform when they need to after the training. And I said all that to say, it's funny because we all operate at our lowest point of training. When in a crisis situation, you're only going to operate, not if you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu and kung fu and you're a good shooter, sniper. No. At the end of the day, in a crisis situation, you're only going to operate at your lowest level of training. And that's why repetition is key. But it seems, and I love this is so inspiring just for a number of reasons, that you are still indoctrinated. And it's been, time has passed, but you've been indoctrinated and you still have the capacity to turn that switch on. And that's a gift, because you're not complacent, and I know you probably can't afford to be complacent.
Not at all.
None of us can. But the fact that you're living on the wire. I kind of live on the wire technically, so I understand even to this day, and I can literally look you in your soul and say I understand where you are, and it just feels good to know, not your stress, but it feels good to know that you can be here and centered and having these fluid conversations, and you're still doing your fight and you're still climbing uphill, and you look like me and you're going through the things you're going through, but you're holding it so well. And that's a message to women and men, but women out there, minorities out there, that listen, if you can do it, anybody else can do it, and that it doesn't have to eat you alive. Am I right? I'm not going to speak for you.
No, you're definitely, right. I would say, for me, I have my routine or my things that kind of keep me grounded. So you were speaking about religion. I'm not religious anymore, but I grew up that way, and so it's listening to that music that I grew up with, it helps me too. It helps to calm me, and just music in general, so you also have to find those, what can I say, your place of peace, or your happy space, or your safe space. Maybe not safe space, but a space within you that is peaceful to you, that you can go to all the time, whenever. And it's something maybe that remembering in your childhood, something that you grew up with, like I said, music or movies or anything like that. It's just finding that something for you that brings peace in your mind, first of all, because that's where the battle is, Like, I could very easily slip into this crazy paranoid lady, very easily, and thinking that everybody's out to get me, which, that may be the case, but I can't operate that way, because then I'm not operating from a sound mind, and so it's just being able to have that I guess the right perspective, at all times as well. While I am still situationally aware, and I am on heightened security alert, or heightened alert, I can still function. I can still go and grocery shop or have a conversation with the waiter, or, you know what I'm saying? I'm just not always amped up and like, this person's out to get me and, got knives and, ready to just, do whatever, it's very important, because it's a very fine line when we're talking about security, and especially this type of situation that I'm in. It's a very fine line between, being what do I want to say, being vigilant and being paranoid, and it's you can very easily slip into the paranoia. And so that is definitely something that I have tried to be aware of and try to find just that place of peace for myself. And so that's something that I will say to anybody that's in a situation like that. Find the peace within you so that you can manage, so that you don't lose your mind in the process.
security is defense, okay? And the purpose of defense is to protect. But if you destroy what you're protecting, okay, your life and the quality of it, okay, maybe you'll protect that little piece that we call our actual sentience, our life, our consciousness on this planet. But if you destroy everything that's beautiful about it, what have you gotten yourself? What have you won? So it is a fine line, but it's probably the most important one that we walk, because if we do that to ourselves, what do we need enemies for? I mean, we fight their battles for us. So we have to remember to enjoy. We have to do both. Bingo.
I feel like there should be like all types of dings because we're dropping out.
We can do that. We can do that. We're
dropping it, all of us. Like, this is powerful.
I got dings.
You know what I mean? Like the listeners here should be really think about how much of a blessing. How about this? Anybody listening to this is your message. This is your sign. This is your blessing, because this is some serious alpha. Well, what I really appreciate, if I may, is listening to you, Janice, speak to the thin line of being hypervigilant and being paranoid. Not being on the center stage of your center, but being, let's just use the word callous enough, conditioned enough to understand the difference. And I think a lot of women who find themselves or a lot of people, that's not excluded to women, a lot of people who find themselves in austere situations where they are in a position where they feel they may be hunted by, whether it's a predator or a abusive spouse or law enforcement. I don't judge. And I don't. And I can't judge. So
it's not always the bad guys on the other side of that equation, is it? Let's be honest.
You see me? So I understand. But what's beautiful about this message is that there is a way that you can live and be happy and centered as long as you maintain. I'm going to use a movie reference here. There was that movie called Inception, and he had a piece that reminded him that he was home. It was his centering piece, and they would spin the top. And I think about that movie all the time when I'm expressing to either clients or even to myself. This is my reality. I know that I'm here now. My practice is Tai Chi and meditation. And if you can find your center, and yours was music, or and your other certain patterns of life that create your center, I think that's one of the most important things that happen. Especially, I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna be quiet, but especially when I get clients that have lost their mental faculties due to their inability to explain the circumstances that are happening to them when they're under a cyber attack. Because that's probably one of the most magical feeling or mystical feeling, dark magic feelings ever to happen to somebody. I can't relate because, I am a hacker, so I can't relate to that feeling of not understanding what's happening. But, somebody who's not a layman, if you will, picking up their phone and the phone's blinking, or they lose their emails and text messages are disappearing, that can sound insane to people. And unfortunately, I've seen that. I've seen the woman on her last leg, literally has already been 5150, legitimately. And this has happened a few times in the last 2 years. Already 5150, sent to the hospital, to the 5th floor. And for those who don't know, the 5th floor, or the 5150 is when you commit somebody for mental instability concerns, right? And they're at their last leg. They're saying to themselves, I don't know who to trust. And that comes to my mind is, how did you get my number? That's the first thing. How did you find me out? How did you find me? A cop, this is exactly what this last person said. A cop overheard me explaining my situation to my probation officer, or not to a law enforcement officer. And then that cop walked over and said, you need to call this guy. And I met that cop because I had trained him and trained his whole, group of, he did special things. And I trained him. So if he had not come across people like us or come across me, then she would have never got that number and nobody would have been able to help her. Mm-hmm. And this is the kind of situations where we have to really think. When you are familiar with security, and that's why you're so gifted, Janice, because you are, like, and you know that. You can, I can tell by the way you said it with your soul. It's just like, thank you. But you're so gifted that your message, your platform, your experience, like, I can't wait to read the book first and foremost, because I know it's going to cut down. And
Yes.
I'm writing mine now. Then you're going to write yours. We're going to trade books. But the way you manage this as a civilian, and you're not really a civilian anymore. Like, I would take you in the field with me. We had to go to the range a few times. But, as a civilian, the way that you're able to articulate the mindset that you have to adapt, the way that you're able to even express that is a gift. Because the people that are listening, they've heard this black guy speak, and they've heard everybody else speak. When they hear that woman's voice, and they say, "Oh wow, she's living it," because not many of us are out there doing it like that. So I'm even more honored to even hear that, so the audience can have that blessing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I honestly think it's so important, and there is a book coming. When, I don't know, but I definitely want to share my story, because I think people, a lot of times, they feel like things are so far out of their control that they don't know what little small simple steps that they can take to feel more secure, to secure their families, their loved ones, and from there, I think all other things can flourish rather, once you at least you're aware of life, right? You're aware of what's happening around you always, and you may not be dealing with some crazy ex that's hunting you down or anything like that, but just to be aware. We have so many situations where there's active shooters, being aware of something like that, and you're saying, this person looks suspicious. People don't even pay attention to that. I'm not saying that those situations could have been prevented, but who's to say? Maybe there wouldn't be such loss of life all the time. People were more aware of what's happening around them and take their eyes out of their phones. I see so many people, which is so weird to me. They look literally like zombies with their faces in their phones. And you know what I'm immediately thinking? I can snatch your purse right now. I could come up beat you upside your head. Like and it's always young women. Not always, or not only even, but still they're by themselves. Dressed really sexily, but their phones are, they're just glued to their phones. And it's like, you're making yourself vulnerable unnecessarily. And not even just on a security situation, just watching parents with their children, and their parents are glued to their cell phones, and their children are just, and it's like, we're just so disconnected from life as it's happening. And I just want to be able to make people aware of that, and if my story can help anybody, I'm happy to do that. And so I'm really glad that I got to speak to you, and I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing and making it, I guess, sort of dumbing it down for just a regular person to understand, so that they can, digest it and figure out how to implement it in their own personal lives.
I appreciate that.
The people with a need are never going to align with the people who also happen to be experts. So it seems like if we actually want to help them, we have to do better. And it certainly seems like, Jason, that's your aim.
Well, when it's time for me to transition, I'd like to at least say I've committed my essence to the world. And my essence to the world is whether or not I hear it, somebody can say something that they heard me say, or employ a methodology of thought that they've adapted from something they learned from some substance that I provided. I'm good. Like, that's all I care about. I'm not trying to change the world. I just want to change myself first, to be the change that I want to see in the world, right? And then I want to be able to say I was a part of a movement that was the resistance.
Well, you already did it once. You already did it once, because I'm fabric shopping later. So
Argamesh, don't forget.
You reached at least one person.
Listen, and not that I'm even attempting to speak to anything I know about you. What I'm saying is, if you know anybody that was in a situation where extra finances would be in their benefit, buying a spool of Argamesh and literally making little pockets, even if you don't know how to sew, generates revenue. And I'm talking about it generates revenue for a lot of people, because especially when people start speaking to, I need it. But you should
I'm writing that down.
I'm telling you, like, you think I'm joking? I think listen, wait. We sell it. Like, we have our own bags. We have our own things. So I'm giving this out. Like, I know my old business partner would be listening to this saying, there he goes again, just giving it away, But I used to tell my brother told me this, and I'll never forget this. He said, "Man, Jay," and my brother used to be we both used to be in the streets very bad. So, in a good way. If that makes sense. So I remember one day, I was admiring another person's things, which I don't do anymore, obviously. But I was admiring. I was like, man, look at this Raja. Hey, man, he has all that stuff, man. I wonder, he must be moving keys. And he looked at me and he said, man, if you can't do it, lose it and do it again, and lose it and do it again, and give it away and then do it again, and then do it better than you never had it in the first place. And that stuck with me. I mean, like, I was prolific. At 13, I was like, oh, wow. He's like, anybody can do it once. Anybody can get the million one time. Anybody can snatch a bag, but can you create a bag? Anybody can teach somebody a million things, but how many people can you influence? Like, properly influence. And that's what I really appreciate, even being on the same stage with you, Janice, because I really feel like what you're doing, what you're going through, and that message that you're going to send when people all across the world really get to hear your message, because not a lot of people, you got to be in the know to really get your message, but like know the security and IT and the McAfee store, like you got to really be in it. But when people really get the totality of your experience and your life experience, you're changing people's lives. Women are going to look at you as source. They're not going to be listening to something that comes out of somebody's mouth that they read in a book. You're going to speak from source. You're going to be like, this is what I went through. No, I didn't read it in a book. This is how you apply these technologies. And that is life-saving, because even as tough as I am, I'm even getting aqua in the eyes because I can see that powerful message. Like, I'm like, yo, women and people really in need of the knowledge that you have, that light that you have in the darkest corners of people's minds, that the experiences they're having, going to change their lives because they're going to know it's coming from source. Like, no, this woman actually lived that shit. She's not reading a book and telling you, like, well, turn on airplane mode. No, turn on airplane mode if you don't want to be caught. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean?
Nobody expects this, but Janice has a shyness to her, and you're going to chase her in a hole if you keep it up. She's going to run away.
Yes.
I'll stop. No more. All right. It's tough now. It's all tough. Tough love now.
Listen, we're all on the same page here. I hope that this show has been informative. It has certainly been interesting for me, and I think you're doing fantastic work. I can't say enough about the importance of this, to the point that Janice and I were on a call earlier with somebody else who's looking to do basically the same thing, which is to get focus back on security, back on privacy, and to make it a focus of people who might not necessarily be the target of an assassination attempt, but still, as you say, are part of this world and need to function in it in a way that is going to be compatible with modern technology. And that means preserving not only our own privacy, but helping to preserve the privacy of those around us. So fantastic work, Jason. We would love to have you back. If you have a project, or if you launch that video series, you come on and pump it with us. We'd be thrilled.
Listen, don't threaten me with a good time. I definitely answer both of you like, hey, like I'm coming in. I appreciate you having me. I sincerely appreciate this opportunity. I'm not going to speak in loose terms. This is the most impactful podcast engagement that I've done. One that I feel my life purpose is aligning with another group of people's life purpose. So it's an honor to be here, and I'm glad that we were all able to pick up what we were all putting down.
Yes. I'm glad for that as well, and definitely in the future, whenever you want to come on, and I will keep close with your work, obviously, because it will help me just to stay sharp, and to stay ready, because if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready,
Stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. Yes. Well, if I may add this, were you finished? Because I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yes. No. Please go ahead.
You have a Hulk. Like, that's all you said. You mentioned earlier that you don't have that same kind of safeguard that you had before. I'm letting you know on this podcast today, in your soul, you have a Hulk now. You have an ace up your sleeve. Don't be afraid to use that card. My signal number is in my profile. Never be afraid to use it. If you have a question, if you have a situation, a scenario, you have a Hulk. So
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And that goes for our audience too. You know what? Tips may work if the stakes are not high, but if they are high, you might just want to reach out to a professional. We'll have links in the description so you'll know where to find Jason, and maybe he can make the difference between a bad situation and a not as bad situation for people. It certainly sounds like you've done so a lot. To everybody joining us, thank you again. We hope to see you again next week. Same bad channel, same bad time. No, nothing like that. Not the same day. We're putting these out when we want to, but that's just fine. Janice has her line. I can't stop the show until she does it, so we'll just wait for her to say.
Oh, God. Peace out.
Namaste, peace and blessings. Thank you so much.